Hey everybody, welcome to NEW302. I'm your instructor, Anderson Todd. I will give all of you a bit of a rundown in the second part of this video about who I am and sort of the nature of the course. This video is intended very specifically just to kind of go through the syllabus, so I'm posting it up. I expect that people will still require clarifications about some of the points that are inside of it, but you know, the same as I would for the first class, were we doing this in person, I am, you know, interested in just taking some time, going through some stuff, filling out some of the kind of expectations around the syllabus, et cetera, et cetera. So as you'll see, I posted up a revised syllabus. The first thing I want to say about the syllabus, just for reference sake, is that it is provisional, which is to say that the university sort of bureaucratic mechanism is still a bit slow. Things are still being approved. It is possible, I suspect unlikely, but possible that I may have to make one or more changes to the syllabus that is currently posted. And if so, then you know we'll have to sort of take a quick vote on that because, as always, the syllabus is your contract with the course. So yeah, so bear in mind, I don't imagine that there's going to be any vast overhaul since it's pretty by the numbers, but it is possible that we will have to revise the syllabus and take a quick vote accordingly on grading structure or otherwise. So just for reference. Okay, so that's point one. Point two, read the syllabus. I know that flipping open a syllabus sometimes is just like seeing a massive block of text, and I'm sort of hoping that, you know, going through this will solve some of that problem, but do in fact read the syllabus. So, you know, every year it is the case that I get sort of a bunch of questions, as most instructors do, where people are asking questions and the answer is in the syllabus. So, you know, bear that in mind. Of course, I'm happy to answer those questions. It's not like I'm just going to yell at you and be like, don't read the syllabus, but read the syllabus, obviously. You know, you should know the syllabus. You don't have to have it memorized, but it helps to read it through once and get some sense of the structure and the expectations around the course. We'll go through it too, so if that's your preference, you can always, of course, refer to this video, which will remain available to you, and also I'll be available. So, okay, from the top then. So this is NEW302, full year course, Stories, Patterns, and Symbols. And this course is intended in the main to serve as an introduction and exploration of the work of C.G. Jung. So his sort of theories and more broadly, some of the contributions that he's made to psychotherapy and depth psychology. We're going to look at those theories from a fairly interdisciplinary perspective, as I'll mention when I do the introduction in the other video. I myself am quite interdisciplinary, and I'm partial to looking at things from a lot of different angles. I think that is very often the best way to explore this material. So as such, we'll be looking at this stuff from quite a few different angles. And in this course in particular, because the work of Jung trades so heavily on sort of the narrative structures of myth and fairy tale and the way that those things interact with the structures of our minds and the way that we structure our own experience, we, in addition to looking at sort of conventional theoretical texts, we'll also look at a number of fictional texts. So, you know, if you look through, you'll see that the media section, and we'll go through this in a bit, but the various readings and stuff, it's pretty diverse. There are some introductory books, there are some theory books, there's a number of works of fiction, a novel, there's Watchmen is on there, which is a graphic novel, a term that I don't love. It's a comic book, but it's a 12-issue comic book that made Time Life's best 100 books of the 20th century. So best 100 novels properly of the 20th century. And you'll see that there are quite a few films, and I'll be introducing supplementary stuff, but there are short films and a number of longer films, some of which you can sort of watch on your own time, some of which I'll be providing links for as those weeks come up. So there are documentaries, but there are also you know, straight up narrative films. So, you know, as I mentioned, it's quite interdisciplinary. To that end, one of the things that I think is really important to point out is that people are coming to this course likewise from a lot of different backgrounds, academically and personally, right? So the expectation is that there's going to be a real diversity of cultural background, of personal background, of academic background, background in interests, and that's great. We want that diversity of approach and that diversity of opinion, and that, you know, that general inclusion of lots of different ways of talking about this source material is, I think, really central to understanding many of these ideas, but also to getting not just a propositional understanding of them, but a lived experience of them. And that is also really central to the course. Like many of my courses, I am concerned with this course in not just giving you an academic overview. I don't want it to be dry, for one thing. Obviously, heavy conceptual work sometimes is dry by its very nature, and it can be difficult to understand. But as much as possible, I want the material in this course to provide a set of tools, really, by which you can both understand this material conceptually, but also providing the tools that have made generations of readers of Jung's work interested in it as a method of personal expansion, personal understanding, personal insight, personal growth, right? So the material in this course is in some ways different than the material in many courses because it is not, strictly speaking, simply academic. Rather, Jung's work is intimately interested in a kind of whole philosophy, right? A way of understanding ourselves, a way of understanding the world, and a way of looking at our problems that actually helps us attempt to resolve them. So to that end, you'll see as we go through that a number of the assignments that we're looking at are not, strictly speaking, just essays, right? There are some of those things where we'll be going through more formal academic exercises, but there's also some pieces in there that are reflective, and I think those form a really integral component, okay? So you know, just bear that in mind, that in many ways this course, you know, is going to ask you not just to engage with the material in an intellectual fashion, but to try to engage with the material in a personal fashion. And generally speaking, the feedback on that from people who have taken the course is quite good. You know, I don't want to make any promises, but you know, generally speaking, people find it to be a relatively enriching experience when they engage with it. And I think it's not uncommon for people to find that it does end up having applications towards their own lives. That was definitely my experience when I took the course many years ago. And it's important for me to sort of carry that forward and to try to offer people that opportunity as well. Another thing that I will say really quickly before we get into the nuts and bolts. This course, more than I would say the other courses that I have taught at the university, is one where I have traditionally placed a great deal of emphasis on community. And what I mean by that is when I took the course many years ago, my experience of it as a full year course was that it transcended in some ways the normal experience that I had of a course at the university, insofar as, you know, the delving into ourselves and the discussion of each other, and nobody has to talk about anything they're not comfortable with, obviously. But that degree of disclosure meant that there was this sort of accelerating intimacy that often came up. Many of the sort of very close friends that I made in undergrad were friends that I made in this course. And so, you know, my experience of that was quite influential on the way that I have traditionally structured this course. And that goes both for sort of experiences within the classroom, but also, you know, periodically attempting to organize social events. So typically speaking, when I've taught this course previously, at the end of each semester, I have tried to introduce a social event, an opportunity for people to socialize outside the classroom, right? I mean, I can't really let my hair down right now. But I could a little, but you know, the idea is, you know, it's attempting to create a social environment, a community environment where people feel comfortable, but also where there's an opportunity to talk about things, deep things, potentially speaking. Okay, so here's the thing. You are, I'm sure at this point, aware that you're watching a video and we're not in a classroom. And that's been something of a struggle for me, actually, in reformulating the way that I am thinking about this course and the way that I intend to approach it. the question is, given that everybody is watching me, by themselves, presumably, and that it's very possible that you guys will never be in a room together, how can we then create those community links? So to that end, there are a few things that I'm going to be trying in this case. One is I'll be activating the discussion section, or have in fact activated the discussion section on Quercus, and I'll be sort of framing discussions and some exercises. That is where your participation grade will come from, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the idea really is I want to be able to create a space where people can mingle. And intellectually and personally, you'll see when we start getting into that a little bit next week, that some of the things that I have in mind are as much about trying to get to know each other in a realistic way without doing a bunch of forced icebreaker stuff. I hate those. I hate those icebreaker exercises in classes. I don't do them normally. I like things to be a bit more organic if I can manage it. But in this case, I'm going to be sort of trying to kick the ball off and see what we can do in terms of forming some community. And with a little luck, if things, have sorted themselves out a bit more by the end of the year, that is to say by April, it would be great to be able to do a social event. I would very much like that. I suspect that doing one in December is probably not likely, given the current situation, such as it is. Just to bear that in mind. And, obviously that's for the participation of anybody that can come. If I'm going, it'll be in Toronto. So, I recognize that is necessarily an issue for people at large, but I want to let you know that is sort of one of the goals that I have here. And I think it's really important to the course. So I would encourage people to engage in that discussion and to come to the various discussions. Okay, so that's all preamble. Okay, so the nuts and bolts. First things first, where does this course happen? It happens online. It's gonna take place in a few different formats, okay? So every week, this week included, I will be posting up a video, typically actually one or more. I'm gonna actually try to make my videos a little shorter so that they're consumable. I have, I have a habit of recording kind of long. As some of you probably already know, I released a video last year that was half of a lecture and it was 4 hours long. I promise I won't do that. So instead, what I'm going to try to do is break things up by the natural discussion points so that I can sort of lecture on it, make a few points, leave some things hanging in the air for you guys to consider, right? Make some observations, try to link it into the material. And there will probably be a few of those a week. This week, there will be 2. There will be this one, which discusses the syllabus, and then there will be a more general sort of introduction to Jungian ideas. Okay, so that's the first thing. There will be online lectures. The online lectures will be posted, okay, probably by early afternoon on Thursday. All right, that's the idea. You don't have to watch them on Thursday necessarily, okay? Obviously, if you have the time, watch them on Thursday. And I'm gonna try to keep those to kind of 2 hours and under, like an hour and a half. This class would normally be 3 hours in length. I don't want to saddle people with significant additional time commitments. I understand that people have a lot on their plate and that the general sort of circumstances and emotional complexities of the pandemic have made it, additionally complex for people, right? It's difficult. And this is an unusual format to get used to. So I'm going to try to keep things under 2 hours, like an hour and a half of lecture bits. Watch those when you can. I am also aware that people are dialing in potentially from locations all over the globe, right? So, trying to just hold a lecture at a fixed time is not going to work with everybody's schedule. Hence, pre-recorded lectures, you watch them when you watch them. I do recommend you watch them, okay? It's not mandatory. You won't be graded on watching them. But I suspect that, in trying to understand the material, you may find it useful. So I do recommend. And I hope anyway, that they'll be sufficiently interesting to you that you will want to watch them, or at least, some of them. So that's one thing. Okay, so that's point one. Lectures will appear. Okay, video lectures will appear. They'll appear on YouTube, so they should be widely and broadly accessible. to you. I will post the links in the announcements section. That is where I'm going to do the bulk of my communication for this course, so make sure you're checking it. So I will record videos. I'll post them in on Thursday afternoon, typically by noon. I'll try to get them up earlier if I can, but I'm also realistic about my workflow. And so often it is the case that I will be like still editing on Thursday morning. That's not uncommon for me. So yeah, and then thereafter they'll be there. You can watch them. So that's thing one, videos posted Thursday afternoon. Those are sort of the lecture component of this course from my side. Part two. On Thursday evenings, I will make myself available on Zoom, and you can see my my Zoom address is included in the syllabus. I will make myself available on Zoom basically in order to facilitate class discussions. So that will run starting next week on the 17th. That will run from 6 p.m. till 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? So Toronto time. The idea there is, you know, for people to come in, and mostly I figure that's going to be kind of Q&A, initially speaking. I expect that there will be cross discussion and so on and so forth, but a lot of it is going to be off the bat, people looking to clarify points in the material of the lecture. It's an opportunity to do that, but also to get a little bit of cross chatter going in that online format. That's meant to simulate the classroom a little bit, and I recognize that it is not going to do a perfect job, but I'm hoping that it provides some useful additional support. Again, you're not required to attend, okay? I recommend that you do if you're interested, if you can, if you have questions, please show up, but it's not, you won't be graded on attendance. That's not how that's going to work, okay? Now also, I'll be hosting Zoom time on Fridays, okay, from noon until 1:30, again, Eastern Standard Time, so Toronto time. That is office hours, okay? So the idea is, you know, yes, there's some room for discussion there, but also it's an opportunity to both come in and ask specific questions, right? If you're wondering about the assignments, if you are looking for certain kinds of feedback on assignments that you are working on, if you have points of general theoretical consideration, if you want to discuss things, okay? If you want to do that privately, you need to let me know, right? So it's the case that we'll have to like set a time slot. Okay, and so that means like if you click into Zoom and you end up sitting in the waiting room, it means that somebody's in my office. Okay, so just be patient, and I'll, you know, cycle people through with some frequency. Yeah, if you're not too worried about other people, just say that when you arrive. So like make arrangements with me if you need a private meeting, and we'll set a time. Okay, and those time slots will have to be reasonably short just to accommodate the flow of traffic. So, you know, 10 to 15 minutes, but with a concentrated meeting, you can cover quite a bit in 10 to 15 minutes, okay? So that'll be on Fridays. That's my office hours. I encourage you to attend likewise. I do recognize that, again, people's personal schedules and also the fact that people are international means that those times may not necessarily work well for you. That's okay. I'm flexible, but you need to reach out to me. In addition to teaching at the university, I'm also a private practice psychotherapist. So I do sort of see clients through the week with some frequency. In addition to that, I'm involved in a bunch of other projects. So I help run a lab, and I run a not-for-profit, and I'm engaged in some research projects. And so my schedule can fill up a fair bit. But if you reach out to me, we will find a time, okay, in which we can meet on Zoom, or if need be, a phone call and discuss. Because I recognize that the times that I provided may not necessarily fit with people's work schedule, with their school schedule, or with, you know, whatever the time zone that they find themselves in, okay? So reach out to me. Okay, so it's online. It is Thursdays nominally, but, you know, that's somewhat flexible. My Zoom link is posted there. If you are not familiar with Zoom, and at this point, I assume most people have used Zoom since it has become the medium by which our civilization is being conducted. But if you're not familiar with Zoom, just reach out. If you have problems figuring out or whatever, it's not hard to set up. It's a very simple platform in a sense. It's web-based. So like if you have the link, you can pretty easily, you know, get set up on your computer. It's very straightforward, and I have found it to be a quite stable platform. I have a premium upgraded account, so the security is pretty good. Yeah, so, but in the event that you have some trouble, please just reach out to me if you're having problems sorting it out, and we'll get that figured out. Right. Most of the course announcements that I make, well, all of the course announcements that I make will be made in the announcements section of the Quarkus page. So you need to be checking that, right? That is where I'm going to be posting the video links. It's where I'm going to be posting certain kinds of things for assignments and supplementary materials of various kinds that you will probably find useful and hopefully interesting. So you're going to want to check announcements with some frequency. For things that I consider to be extremely important, I will probably also send out a broadcast email just to maximize the chances that I'm actually going to get, in touch with you. But get into the habit of checking announcements pretty regularly and like reading the announcements, If you need to email me, so you can send me a message through Quarkus, obviously, but if you need to email me, I've listed my institutional email on the syllabus as well. What I ask in that respect is just a couple of things. One, if you're emailing me, try to keep it to like 5 lines or fewer. If it's longer than that, that's probably something that we actually need to talk about. Try not to send me like a page of stuff, be it questions or comments or theoretics. It's not that I don't find that stuff interesting. It's just that the sort of sheer amount of mail that I receive makes it considerably less likely that I'm going to be able to give you a reasonable response. If I happen to have a slow spot and I get to it, I may. But like if it's past 5 lines, the guarantee that I'm going to be able to respond to your points effectively drops pretty sharply. Okay, so try to keep your emails to like 5 lines. If it's more than that, look at scheduling some kind of opportunity to talk with me online. The other thing that I ask is give me like 48 hours of turnaround time, okay? So if I haven't gotten back to you by the next day, it's not that I don't intend to get back to you, it's just that I'm like busy. And I do tend to be quite busy. So yeah, just give me time to kind of maneuver. Sometimes things come up. Sometimes I have, client crises that have to be dealt with fairly acutely, and that can often occupy my time. So just give me 48 hours turnaround, okay? But you should feel free to email me. I'm not opposed to that idea at all. Just keep it relatively brief, relatively tight, and give me 48 hours turnaround. Okay. So that's page 1. Page 2. Okay, so verbatim. The writings of Swiss psychologist C.G. Jung had a pervasive but often under-acknowledged impact on 20th century thought. In this course, we will undertake a close reading of a selection of Jung's works in order to evaluate Jung's contribution to contemporary issues related to religion, anthropology, art and literature, popular culture, creativity, gender, and postmodernism. We will begin with Jung's model of the psyche and theory of analytical psychology, and then move to an applied study of hermeneutics as a complex and nuanced critical methodology and interpretive practice. As part of our own interpretive practice, in our reading of imaginative and cultural texts, we will consider a range of viewpoints from Jungian to post and non-Jungian perspectives. So that's the capsule. A lot of that is going to seem like gibberish right now, and that's fine. When we get into it, those things will become clearer. There is a note here, which the university has made fairly clear needs to be accessed around the course material. I don't anticipate it will be a problem here, but you never know. So it pays to be cautious. So that's this. If you are a citizen of another country and/or accessing your courses at the University of Toronto from a jurisdiction outside of Canada, okay, please note that you may be subject to the laws of your country in which you are residing or any country in which you have citizenship. Okay? The University of Toronto has a long-established commitment to freedom of expression, with this right enabled by an environment valuing respect, diversity, and inclusion. In your classes, you may be assigned readings or discuss topics that are against the law in other jurisdictions. I encourage you to become familiar with any local laws that might apply to you and any potential impact on you if course content and information could be considered illegal, controversial, or politically sensitive. If you have concerns about these issues, please contact your instructor, that's me, directly to discuss with me. Okay, so what does that mean? I don't think it's going to apply here. It's highly unlikely, I suspect, that anything that we're going to cover is going to be sensitive. I don't think it's going to be particularly politically sensitive, so I don't anticipate this being a big deal. But, if you think it might be, it's definitely worth reaching out. Obviously, you know, the university certainly doesn't want to, and I definitely don't want to put anybody in a compromising position, okay? So if you're dialing in basically from someplace outside of Canada and you think that might be an issue, you know, let me know. And, you know, we can have a discussion around it. We'll figure out a working solution for that, okay? So just flagging that off the top. Okay, next, the book list. Okay, so the reading list. If you're taking a look at the reading list, you may suddenly go, oh my God, like it's a lot of books. The course does ask a fair bit of reading, right? It's a third-year course. There's a fair bit of reading involved. But I want to let you know that not all of the reading is sort of strictly speaking mandatory, okay? So there are required texts and there are readings that will be posted online, okay? And some of those texts, okay, are things that I strongly recommend you read. You technically don't have to read anything if you don't want to. But obviously, the more you read, and reading the supplementary material and the text in addition to the lectures is going to give you a much stronger grasp on the source material than not reading it. So as I already mentioned in sort of my first announcement, okay, that I sent out to everybody, the first thing I recommend you start with, as mentioned right here, is Introducing Jung, a Graphic Guide. Why? This is, you know, it's an introducing book. It's very simple. It's graphically heavy. Why do I recommend that? Well, I recommend that people almost always start from that position, whether they know the material or not. You know, you can read one of those books in under an hour, properly speaking, and it's going to give you the kind of broad conceptual overview that's useful to then anchor concepts as you go around. With something like depth psychology and Jungian thinking, okay, the complexity and interrelatedness of the ideas in it really require a certain amount of what Jung called circumambulation, okay, which means like circling around it, making successive passes. Often a concept is not going to be perfectly clear to you on the first pass, or if it is clear to you initially, right, it's going to be more complex when you learn certain other ideas, okay? So Introducing Jung is a terrific opening text because it's just dead simple. It'll explain things in extremely simple terms, and that is useful. I have a big library. I have, I don't know, so between 3,000 and 4,000 books here in my home, and a really extensive depth psychology library, and I have Jung's complete works, and I have the Red Book, and I have all that stuff. In addition to all the books that I own, I also own about 50 introducing guides, including Introducing Jung. Okay, now that isn't something I consult much anymore because, like, I've read it and I've read the other stuff. But the point is, those other introducing guides, right, are things that I occasionally consult when I just want a quick conceptual refresher. Okay, so I highly recommend that be your starting point before you come in at anything else. It'll explain things in clear terms with images, right? And then you can dive in on some of the other texts. So that's the first one I recommend. The second one that I recommend is Man and His Symbols, okay? Man and His Symbols, widely available in a mass market paperback. You can get it for about 12 bucks. That's new. If you buy it used, you know, whatever price you can get, right? There are many millions of copies. They're around everywhere, okay? Man and His Symbols is a set of 5 essays, okay, which the first of which is by Jung himself, and then the other 4 are by sort of prominent Jungians who were students of his, explaining different aspects of theory. That's the second book I recommend you jump in on, okay? Because again, it's less simple than Introducing Jung. It'll give you sort of a taster menu in some sense of some of these conceptual ideas, and it'll put you on firm footing. It's very readable, very digestible, inexpensive, etc. All good things. The third book that I strongly recommend, really strongly recommend you read, okay, after that is Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Memories, Dreams, Reflections is, essentially speaking, Jung's autobiography, okay? He co-authored it together with somebody, but it's his story. That's useful because you can see the developmental arc of how he came to these ideas. So we'll talk about a fair bit of this in the lecture, and we'll discuss some of it in class, but it will give you sort of Jung's view on where he came from, you know, how he came to these ideas and how they kind of played out in his own life and experience, both personally and as a therapist. He was quite a gifted therapist. So that likewise is, I think, a really strong text to come in on for understanding some of the key ideas, okay? And then the last of that kind of core set that I'm strongly recommending is The Essential Jung. That's edited by Anthony Storr, S-T-O-R-R. And The Essential Jung is, it's an anthology. It's a curated kind of thing, which takes selections out of Jung's work. Jung was a very prolific writer, okay? He has more than 20 full-size books of various kinds that are filled with essays, articles, and a lot of that material is exceptionally complicated. Certainly a bunch of it is not introductory. And if you kind of just pick that stuff up and start reading into it, the likelihood that it's going to be that easy to follow is not super high, right? Likewise, right, a lot of people these days have shown interest in the relatively recently published Red Book, which was a text that Jung wrote. I have my copy right here, but it's so big. I'll probably bust it out for the second one of these, the second lecture tonight. But the point is, if you try to jump into the Red Book without having other kinds of conceptual grounding, it's just, you're going to get lost. It's beautiful, but highly mystical and difficult to interpret in many places, okay? So The Essential Jung is great because it is a curated collection in a sense, and it's organized by topic, which means that it's a terrific jumping off point for these like condensed nuggets on subjects, and then you can branch out from there. So those are the first four. I highly recommend, okay? Introducing Jung, Man and His Symbols, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and The Essential Jung. Okay. The next one I'm going to pretty strongly recommend, okay, is there are 3 issues of Rick Veitch's comic, Roarin, Rick's Rarebit Fiends. Okay, that's not by Jung, but Veitch is a comic book artist, and he is sort of a dream aficionado, and he's a student, not literally a student of Jung's, but he's a student of Jungian thinking. Those comics are great because aside from being beautiful, I have followed this comic for more than 20 years. And the thing that has really jumped out to me about these recent issues, the 3 issues that I've listed, are that Veitch puts his finger both sort of visually and in terms of his personal story on what it can mean to engage with some of these Jungian ideas. It's fascinating and strange, but also brings it to life in a way that just reading text on a page is, can't match. So I recommend those. I mean, they're just cool. They're cool anyway, I think. But in addition to that, they sort of animate this material in a certain kind of way, okay? And in theory, you could stop there. If you just read those books, you will have lots of conceptual grounding to look at. So I don't recommend you do that. I recommend you read other stuff, but I also am realistic, and I know that students have a significant workload. And likewise, I know that, frankly, when I was an undergrad, I did not read everything that was assigned to me. So I don't have the expectation that you're going to, and I'm not going to make your grades contingent on doing that, okay? But I do recommend you read more, okay? I've listed a lot of sources, including readings. These are going to be things that we'll be sort of discussing, okay? And there'll be things that my lectures relate to. If you've done the readings, you're going to have a much easier time understanding. I'm not going to, in my lectures, explain everything down to the details. I'm going to make the assumption that you've done a certain amount of reading, okay? And when it comes to doing your own essays, your own presentations, et cetera, having a relatively deep understanding of, at the very least, the material that you're specifically talking about is going to be important. You do have to read stuff, okay? So, for instance, okay, we do a whole month on the Odyssey, okay? And I've listed a translation of the Odyssey. I happen to like this translation, the Fagles translation of the Odyssey. Other translations are fine. I mean, it's the same story, but I like the Fagles translation. We're doing a whole month on that. If you don't have it, it's going to be much trickier for you to follow along. And if you've never read the Odyssey, you probably should. There's a reason we have had this book for 3,000 years. It's a good book, okay? So the same goes for lots of the other texts that I'm listing, okay? You know, I'm strongly recommending that you read them, but, you know, I also recognize that you're probably not going to read every single thing, okay? And I also understand that some of you are going to be, pinched for money. It's expensive to buy a lot of books, and you're supposed to set money aside for books. I get that. But I also don't want you to empty your wallet out buying hundreds of dollars. I hate it when textbooks are super expensive, okay? So I've also been working with the library to try to get electronic resources for most of these things wherever possible. Some of them have licensing issues and stuff attached to them. You're going to have to buy them. But I will make those resources available wherever I can so that you can get access to stuff for free. Personally speaking, I hate reading electronically. I read scientific papers in the news that way. But like when it comes to reading something with any kind of conceptual, conceptual depth to it, I just don't like reading off a screen. I don't love e-readers. I like books. Shocking. So yeah, for reference, but I'm going to try to make things as available as possible. Okay. So just I'm going to run through these books very briefly. I'll give you a capsule description. We'll talk more about them as they come up through the course, but there's the Fagles translation of the Odyssey. There are two books by Marion Woodman, who is now deceased, but she was a quite prominent Jungian who was, among other things, responsible, actually, for sort of founding the course suite that this program rotates around. So this course that you're taking was founded by a substantial endowment from Marion Woodman and her husband, Ross. That Woodman endowment sort of got the Jungian stuff rolling at the University of Toronto. I had a chance to meet Marion Woodman a couple of times before she died, and she was a really interesting, insightful kind of firecracker of a woman. Yeah, it was a really interesting analyst, interesting thinker. And her books, the two I've listed, Addiction to Perfection and The Pregnant Virgin. Addiction to Perfection especially, I think, often has a strong impact for people when they read it. It, among other things, talks about addiction, talks about perfection, duh. But also it talks significantly about sort of mother-daughter relationships and some of the archetypal dynamics there. And I've had quite a few students who have read that book and found it a powerfully resonant experience for them, men and women. So I do recommend those two, right? Addiction to Perfection and The Pregnant Virgin. As you can see, Watchmen is on there. Make no mistake, the movie adaptation from 2009 was pretty good, but it is highly inferior to the actual book. And the book is dense and deserves the praise that it receives. So again, I strongly recommend it. We're going to do a week where we'll talk about Watchmen, and I think you'll see that it's a really fascinating text from the perspective of sort of archetypal dynamics and the hero. There is a novel by Robertson Davies, The Manticore. This is the second novel of his Deptford trilogy, the first of which is widely assigned, or used to be widely assigned in high school English courses, Fifth Business, the third of which is called World of Wonders. This second one is on the syllabus because it is a book that is specifically framed around the main character's experience of Jungian analysis. So it follows from the events of the first book. It follows a different character than the first book, Fifth Business. But the second book of the trilogy is about one of the peripheral characters of the first book entering Jungian analysis to deal with the events that came out of the first book. As such, it's dated, it's from the 70s, but it's got a really kind of interesting blow-by-blow take on what an analysis looks like, right? What's going on in an analysis? And Robertson Davies is just an awesome writer, so the book is really quite good. So that's in there. Okay, there are two Edward Edinger texts, okay? Ego and Archetype, and Anatomy of the Psyche. Ego and Archetype is a more introductory text, and it has to do with ego and archetype, and specifically the relationship between ego and other parts of the psyche in Jungian terms. It's clearer than Jung in a lot of ways, and so it's an interesting way of looking at his ideas. I don't agree with everything in that book, and you will find that, in fact, there are many commentators, Jung included, who I do not agree with all of their takes on things. Like every other human being, they're at least 50% wrong. Nobody is right about everything, and as we know from science and cultural ideas generally, things change. People's ideas change. Understanding of things change. So, but there is nevertheless a great deal in ego and archetype that I think is sort of lucid, strikingly clear. People sometimes find it a really useful guide to understand some of these dynamics, where it's a little muddier when they're looking at Jung himself. The other one that I've recommended is Anatomy of the Psyche. This is not by any stretch a beginner's text, okay? So if you get into that, it's like you're really getting into something. But it's Edward Edinger's book at Alchemy from a Jungian depth psychological perspective. It's a really interesting book. It's a good book, okay? But you should bear in mind that necessarily it's a bit more advanced, so you're not going to want to start there. But for those of you that are interested in that side of things, the alchemical side, that's something that we will discuss in class. But also, this book has been quite influential in the field, and again, approaches those ideas with a bit more sort of conceptual clarity and focus than I think Jung's texts themselves do. Okay, then you will notice the course reader. Lots of these things. These are articles, fairy tales of different kinds, things that we will discuss in sort of given weeks, okay? So there's some Joseph Campbell that you'll see in there, right? Hero with 1,000 Faces, the classic Joseph Campbell material about the hero's journey, et cetera, okay? There's the Edward Edinger Conjunctio essay from Anatomy of the Psyche. So if you don't read the whole book, you can just read that section. There's C.G. Jung's essay on the Spirit Mercurius, which is something we're going to discuss. There's a couple essays by Wolfgang Gigerich, who is a kind of modern post-Jungian who has some extremely provocative ideas. He's really engaged in a sustained intellectual project of trying to reform certain aspects of Jungian thinking in directions that I think are quite provocative and engaging. Again, I don't agree with all of his points, but it's interesting stuff and it's worth considering, so that's in there. And then there are a number of fairy tales, and in the same way as we will look at films and novels and myths, we'll also look at fairy tales as a way of both understanding the material but also using the material to understand the fairy tales. So you can see that in there. Okay, and then there are films. So I'll be posting links to all of these that I can. One is that I recommend pretty early on that if you've never seen it, you should watch The Wizard of Oz, okay? Like sometime in September. If you have seen it, rewatch The Wizard of Oz sometime in September. It's an extremely archetypal story, and it's it's interesting. It's old. It's from 1939. But it stands up in some ways pretty well. I know some people that are still afraid of the flying monkeys. So I highly recommend you watch that. We won't be sort of explicitly taking time in class, but it does form one of the texts that you can write your first short paper on. So it's just worth watching. I highly recommend you do, okay? We will sort of take in-class time, as it were, to watch, however, sort of 3 films. Okay, so the first one that I traditionally do is I do Batman Begins. That's during October, which is Shadow Month, to do Batman Begins, which is it's a Christopher Nolan superhero movie. We'll talk more about why, okay, when we get into the shadow material, but that is traditionally, and I typically screen that at Robarts. I can't do that this year. So instead, I'll be providing links. Here's the kicker. I'm having some trouble getting that link. So it's possible that I may switch that to the Darren Aronofsky film, Black Swan, which is a terrific film if you've never seen it, okay? So we'll do one or the other of those, barring future complication. I will provide you with appropriate links. You should be able to watch it for nothing. Okay, and then a little later, we'll watch a documentary. Again, I'll provide links. I've secured permissions from the publisher. So I provided permissions for a documentary, Marwin Call. I've seen this documentary 12 times probably now. I saw it when it first screened at Film Festival, and it blew my mind at Hot Docs. you know, again, we'll have to talk about it when it gets closer, but I think you'll find that it is a remarkable and surprising film. They did a recent Hollywood fictionalized adaptation called Welcome to Marwen, and I'll discuss this more later, but I do not understand why this film got made. It's one of these movies that you're just like, why? Like, what? That did not need to be made. The original documentary is a striking documentary, though, and you'll see how it touches on a lot of the material, so we'll be watching that. And then at the tail end of January, which is the month in which we do the Odyssey, we will watch a kind of modern adaptation, a Coen Brothers adaptation of the Odyssey, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? So likewise, I've got the screening rights that I can give to you guys. I'll give you a link. You can stream it on your own. It's a great film. The soundtrack is top notch. It's very funny. You know, the acting is really quite good, and it's an interesting take on the Odyssey that highlights some of the structural material that we'll be talking about. So that's one of the ones that we do. And then I've also listed The Way of the Dream. So this is a documentary which was put together by Marie-Louise von Franz and some other people, Fraser Boa, who were Jungian followers, which is about dreams and the interpretation of dreams. It was made in Toronto in the 80s. It sort of fades in and out of YouTube existence. So if I can, I'm going to source the full copy. I've been trying to track it down for several years now and get them to release the rights. And I'm hoping that maybe pandemic situation changes things up. If not, I will supply you with some links and you can watch some selections of it. Again, it's not something that's sort of heavily referenced, but I think you would find it a really interesting take because it's people relating their dreams and then an analyst, Marie-Louise von Franz, interpreting those dreams through a Jungian framework. And so you get a real-time sense of how that Jungian dream interpretation stuff works. And it's quite interesting. And I got some good stories about that documentary because I know some of the people. So there's that. Okay, and then you'll see at the very bottom of the list of sources, there is one other thing that I've listed, and that's Daryl Sharp's Jung Lexicon. This thing is your best friend. Let me repeat, it's your best friend for this material. It is a free resource. It's been free all along. Daryl Sharp is a local Jungian who runs Inner City Books, which is one of the big publisher of Jungian texts here in Toronto and internationally, but they're here in Toronto. And Daryl Sharp put together this lexicon a number of years ago. And it basically is like a big glossary of Jungian terms and pretty lucid explanation, short, but lucid explanations of what they mean. When you are going through this material, if you are like, what is that term? The lexicon is your friend. There's also an assignment that you're really going to want to use the lexicon for, kind of the first assignment, okay? So get yourself a copy of that thing. It's online, it's free, it's widely available, it's fairly comprehensive. Okay, like, you know, some of the other intro texts, it's not a stopping point. So you can't just read this thing and then be like, okay, now I know, you know, but as a supplement, it's really, really terrific. It's good. Okay, so I've specifically listed that as an online material. Okay, I'll post up other things through the year. I'll post up links for things to check, right, for people to check out, articles, supplements, right? For those who want to expand in certain directions. And when you're doing your research paper, likewise, we can have some discussions around that stuff. You're going to use material from outside anything that's on the syllabus, virtually guaranteed, okay? But, you know, this is pretty good. Like I said, there's not an expectation you're going to read every single thing, and I think I've made clear which bits you need to read. Okay, course structure. As I already mentioned, every week I'm going to record and post a lecture or lectures, shorter lectures, okay, on YouTube on several subjects. They will have to do with the topic of the week. We'll go through those very briefly. I will aim to post those midday Thursday before, if possible. You don't have to watch them on Thursday, but you know, you should watch them if you can. And relevant readings and stuff for that will also be on Quirkus, so you can sort of interface between those two things. Like I said, I will be available on Zoom. Not today. I've had some people pop into the waiting room, but I thought I said it in announcements, but it's okay. Start of the year, I get it. It's confusing. But starting next week, okay, the 17th, September 17th, I will be available on Zoom 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays, Eastern Standard Time. That is like class discussion time. And then I will be available for online office hours Friday okay, from noon until 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. And likewise, both those things are my Zoom link. I already went over that stuff. I don't think I need to, exhaust it. Okay, great. Let's talk about your assignments. So you can see there are a number of assignments, okay? So, they add up. The idea here is a number of smaller assignments, I think, is a much fairer way of handling things than like giving you a bunch of monster assignments. First thing off the bat, I should make clear, there is no test, there is no exam, okay? I have a very strong opinion on this. I think that giving people a timed final exam for a course like this is absurd. And what I mean by that is like timed exams have their place. If you're a medical student, we want to time you under pressure to see if you can do medical stuff, because you may be under time pressures in the world to reproduce that knowledge. That represents, right? Time and pressure represent a legitimate test of those abilities and your learning of them. But I'm hard pressed to imagine a circumstance where timed understanding of Jungian ideas is a relevant way to approach it. And in fact, I think that it's sort of antithetical to really trying to learn the material in depth, okay? So my assumption is that like nobody is ever gonna be like, interpret this dream in 20 minutes or the bomb goes off. If that happens, well, you call me up and be like, you were wrong, Instructor Todd. Don't call me Instructor Todd. Anderson. You were wrong, Anderson. Okay, so if that happens, my bad. But generally speaking, that doesn't strike me, it doesn't make sense in context. So no tests, no exams, just assignments, okay? Now, the first assignment. The first assignment will be due October the 24th. All assignments will be handed in through Quarkus. All assignments will be handed in through Quarkus. All assignments will be handed in through Quarkus. Don't hand in hard copies. I'm not gonna go in and pick them up. Don't put them under my office door. I'm not gonna go in and pick them up. If that happens, it's like they won't be submitted. All assignments are handed in through Quarkus. So there will be submission, right, portal. There will be a submission portal for each assignment. You'll submit it in PDF format. If that is tricky, if you're sort of not sure about that, I can give you some pro tips. It's not hard. Pretty much every word processor will now output PDF. So you're going to be submitting your assignments when they're written in PDF through the Quarkus portal, okay? That's how they will get graded, because I'm going to grade them inside of Quarkus. And so if they don't show up there, they won't get graded. And if you slip it under my door because you didn't pay attention or read the syllabus, that's late marks, and I'm sorry. Okay, so fair enough. First assignment, October 24th, annotated glossary of terms. Okay, so what's the deal with this assignment? I'm going to talk more about these things as we get closer, but just to give you an overview. The idea is that you're going to write 5 separate pages, and on each page, you're going to provide an annotated glossary, okay? So if you look at the actual description of the assignment, you'll see that it's sort of 3 big paragraphs on each page. The first one is you're gonna construct a paragraph out of Jung's definition for a Jungian term, okay? 5 separate Jungian terms. One of them must be the self or self, but otherwise there's flexibility. People pretty often go with some of the basics, ego, persona, shadow, anima, self. That's a very common one, and that's fine, okay, if you want to go that common. If you want to get into stuff that's more exotic, you can, but obviously it's going to complicate things, okay? So the point is you got 5 separate terms. Each one has a page. First paragraph on page, okay, is constructed definition using Jung's words. Second paragraph on page is a definition in your words, okay? You're going to write the definition. And then the third one, okay, is a paragraph or 2, right, in which you illustrate your understanding of the term. Okay, so you can explain that in terms of imaginative works in a course. You can explain it in terms of your own experiences. There's some room for flexibility there. But basically what you're doing is animating the concept. You're demonstrating that like you get it and you're connecting it through to something where you can like show it at work in a non sort of purely theoretical fashion. Okay, 5 pages, that's the first assignment. Okay, second assignment, due November 26th. That first assignment is 10%. Second assignment, due November 26th, worth 15%, short essay. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one of the novels or stories or fairy tales or films, one of the things that we've looked at through the first semester, basically. And you're going to pick a main character in there, and you're going to try to illustrate it using Jung's model of the psyche. That's the basic idea. You're doing an analysis. I'll talk more about this as it gets closer to help you guys zone in on the appropriate degree of focus, but that's basically it. You're doing an analysis of some kind of imaginative work, right? A piece of fiction, right? Or the documentary, in which you're sort of zooming in on a character and you're examining them in terms of Jung's theory and structure of the psyche. Again, you're looking to demonstrate that you understand it and that you can interpret things in those terms, okay? So that's November 26th. The third thing is January 28th, okay? And that is the major paper proposal, okay? So what's the deal with this? This is your pitch for the paper, the big paper that you are going to write. The pitch, this proposal, is worth 10%, and it's due January 28th. Why? Two reasons. One, because I want, because you can write on a huge potential range of things. You have to come up with a topic. You won't be provided with a list of topics. I won't give you a topic, period. I won't, okay? You have to come up with a topic. But the potential, as I mentioned, is quite interdisciplinary. There's a lot of topics. If something, captures your interest, and this is something we'll spend time on, I'll give a lecture on a little bit of essay theory and like finding things to work on and stuff. But the point is, the proposal is an opportunity to run that idea past me, where I can give you suggestions, right? I can give you potential sources or ways you might want to think, critiques, whatever, right? But also approval. I can say, yes, this is the paper that you can write, okay? The other reason is this. I'm realistic about people's work habits, okay? I'm myself a fairly lifelong procrastinator. I struggled with that. I'm better than I used to be, but doing things at the last minute is not foreign to me. I don't want to give you a major paper, okay, that's worth 25% of your grade and have it be at the end of the year and then have people scrambling to write it 2 days ahead of time. So part of the idea with the proposal is that if you get started on it back in January, at the very least, at least you've got the idea. You've been kind of thinking about it. You've done some work in that direction. So that is part of the theory. It's not a draft, okay, it's a proposal. But nevertheless, some of the work that you do for the paper, for sure, is something you're going to work at in the proposal, and that's okay, okay? So major proposal, it's not long, 750 words, right? So it's like 3 pages, okay? And in addition to giving your pitch, you're also gonna provide 5 provisional sources, okay? We'll talk more about this, but sources obviously have to be subject to academic standards, okay? So the same academic standards as you would have writing a paper for any other course. I understand that some of you will be coming to this from a background in which you haven't written papers. I sometimes get people who haven't written a paper since high school in these courses. I taught essay writing for a number of years, and so I will, in fact, record and share some videos specifically about the processes of essay writing, and they're largely intended to like take away the scary essay factor. Because some people hear an essay, they look at a final essay that's 3,000 words, and they say, 3,000 words, how am I going to get everything I want inside 3,000 words? Other people look at that and they're terrified, right? They think 3,000 words, like, how can I write a 3,000 word paper? It's not that bad, okay? And in general, people, they stress more about essays than they need to. So I'll go through some of that theory moving forward, but the point is, okay, that initial proposal will cover some of these things, but like academically credible sources, okay, and academically credible ideas. At the end of the day, this is a broad-minded course, but we are at the university, and so we sort of have to play by the rules, right? The rational rules, and we have to play by the rules of attribution. So something we'll discuss more, but you're going to want to bear in mind. Okay, 4, the 4th assignment, which is February 11th, okay, is your watchword matrix interpretation. What does that mean? Well, you don't know yet, and you're not going to, and don't look into it. I'll say this. There's an exercise that I give early on for everybody to complete, okay? And it's a kind of word association exercise. I ask people to complete it, answer a few questions, and then hold it. If you want to, you can submit it. I'll set up a submission portal, and then you'll have a copy in case you lose it. You do it on paper, but you can scan it, okay? in February, this assignment, you're going to go back and interpret some of that. So it will have been several months since you did it. You're going to go back and interpret it. And I will provide you with the resources that you need to do that formal interpretation. I'll do a lecture where I talk about the theory. And in addition, I will provide you with some keys and texts and stuff that help you. I'm not going to give that stuff to you in advance because I don't want to skew the process. But the point is that that assignment, which is worth 10%, and it's on February 11th, will be this interpretation. That is not going to be as academically rigorous in some sense as a standard essay, right, or paper or anything. It's going to be more reflective. You're going to have to use some of the theory, but it's more personal, more reflective, less kind of, you know, academically intense or something, okay? So that's assignment 4. The sort of final assignment of the year is your major paper. There's a 3,000-word paper. It must have an argument. It's March 18th, it's due, and it's worth 25%. And it will be based on what you put in your proposal. So once you have your approved proposal, you're going to base this, you're going to base that on it. Again, I'll come back and talk about that stuff at greater length. I'm very flexible, I think, about topics and things. I want people to work on things that they actually care about and are interested in. That's deeply, deeply important to sort of my pedagogy, my philosophy for the course, and just like me. You just work on things that you're interested in. It serves you much better than writing some garbage paper about something you don't care about. So we'll talk about that. That's something, my nose is super itchy. We'll talk about that. That's something that we will get into in more detail. I have some clues for helping people sort of find their way to topics and things. For some people, they'll just jump in it like fish in water. I get that, but you know, not everybody has that kind of relationship to papers. It's a long paper, but it's very tractable. So anyway, that's worth 25%, March 18th. Okay, and then number 6 here, video presentation and post-presentation reflections. The way that this normally works in the course, right? The way that it normally works in a course is that people do in-class presentations. We can't do that. So instead, what's going to happen is that you're going to create a 20-minute video presentation. Pretty simple. And you're going to share it with the class, okay, for people to watch. That will be part of the focus of conversation. We'll talk about it on the discussion boards. We'll discuss it generally, but it'll be your presentation. You will pick a week. We will do selections, probably not next week, maybe next week. Anyway, in the next couple of weeks, I'll solicit everybody and people can, I have a thing to randomize people and then you get to pick, you can pick your topics accordingly, basically. Okay, and so you'll present in 1 week. I add, you can partner up. You can partner up. If you partner up, you're not required to do a 40-minute presentation. It's still a 20-minute presentation. This is good for certain kinds of things. If you're the sort of person that is like, oh no, presentations are death. Like I hate them. I'm terrified of them. I understand that. This is a course where psychological diversity is a given. Jung invented the term introversion. Okay, some people are introverts. I have known people and seen people for whom presentation is unspeakably terrible, okay? In fact, you know, I think Seinfeld pointed this out years ago, but famously in the US at some point, maybe still, the number one fear listed by people in a public poll was public speaking, number one fear. Number 2, death was number 2. Which means, if you think about it, that people statistically, in aggregate, would rather be in the coffin than delivering the eulogy. Okay, so I understand this. People have a hard time with presentations. There are a few ways you can get around that in this case, sort of. One is that you can partner up. And you can divide the work any way you want. I'm not going to be like, well, you didn't spend equal time on camera. I don't care about that. I don't. You can divide the work any way you want between the two of you. But here's the deal. When you do your presentation, okay, you get, for the 2 people who are signed up, I mark you down, you're a team, you're 2 people, you get 1 grade. 1, period. No exceptions. And that means that you got to pick your partner carefully. If your partner flakes out, if they drop the course, you're on your own. You still have to do it. And I don't change things accordingly, okay? If your partner flakes out, If they're just like, don't do their part of the deal, it doesn't matter. You are still going to get the same grade, okay? And every year there are people who partner up and then their partner, you know, doesn't show up or something. Now, you can see that there are benefits and drawbacks, but the point is you get the same grade, period. No exceptions. It's one presentation, it's one grade, even if it's two people. Okay. Now, that said, if you're shy, you can divide the labor. If you're like, I'll do all the research and the editing if you do the presentation, great. That's fine. You can totally do that if you want to. Also, I encourage people to get pretty creative. You know, I encourage people to be creative and do participatory stuff with the in-class presentations. That's going to be harder in this format, but you can get creative in other ways. Man, if you want to put in music, if you want to put in visual stuff, film editing, awesome, do it. Diagrams, if you want to put in, you know, you can put in interpretive plays if you want. You can put in dance and sculpture. I don't care. It sounds interesting. And a big part of the thing is just keeping people interested, okay? Obviously, you need to convey the material for your presentation for the week. But the point is, you know, great, get creative with it. So you can do it individually if you want. You can pair up if you want. We will have multiple presentations a week. There are 30 people, give or take, in the class. Okay, so, you know, and there's only 24 weeks course, period. And there won't be presentations every one of those weeks. So by definition, there will be multiple people in given weeks, okay? And that's fine. If you want to pair up, that's totally okay. You guys can work that out on the board in order, and we'll discuss that when we start picking days and so on and so forth, okay? But the idea is it's a 20-minute presentation where you're presenting on some aspect of Jungian theory that is tied to the material that we're covering that week, okay? And the idea is to be creative and engaging and also to, you know, to explain the material, to make it clearer to people in various ways, okay? And there's, I think you'll find when you think about it, a lot of cool ways to do that. If you're not that familiar with video stuff, well, you have access to a surprising suite of things to the university. But also, you know, that doesn't matter that much. If you've got like a basic webcam on your computer or a phone, you can make stuff. People make feature films on phones now. So again, that's something we can talk about when it gets a little closer, but I figure everybody has, at this point, basic resources available to them. If for whatever reason you don't, we can work something out. But the idea is that that really, like doing an in-class presentation, this is going to be, you know, kind of a requirement. Okay, so, and you should have plenty of time to work on it. So if we need to figure out a workaround, we'll figure out a workaround. Okay. After your presentation, I expect each student, like the presenting students. So if one or two students gives a presentation, I expect each of them to submit post-presentation reflections. We'll talk more about that as it gets closer, but you'll see that basically it's like 500 words, 2 or 3 pages, right? Where you're talking about your experience of the presentation, what you think worked, what you think didn't, how you know, were surprised or not surprised or whatever by the way the class engaged with that in the discussion, okay? So yeah, the post-presentation. I'll say this, I say it every year, but I'll say it again. You don't get your grade back until I get your post-presentation reflection. Some people do the presentation and then they forget. And then they're like, where's my presentation grade? And the answer is, it's waiting until I get your post-presentation reflections because they are part of the grade, okay? So it is like non-negotiable, you have to do it. Typically the week after you do your presentation. Okay, and then the last part, that's worth 20%, by the way. And it's gonna be on a different day depending on when you're presenting. And then the last bit, participation, 10%. Okay, so normally this is about an in-class participation thing. We can't do that in the same way. So instead, the way that this is going to work is that it will be gauged with your participation on the online discussion forum. Okay, so the in-Quarkus online discussion forum for this course. Like I said, I will get that ball rolling next week, like in terms of, you know, providing discussion topics, but basically it's going to be about your quality and engagement. How much are you bringing? How much are you engaging? It'll be pretty simple to gauge. If you basically never sign up onto the discussion, then you're not going to get the discussion grade. If you are a person who discusses, you know, a lot, well, that doesn't necessarily get you a great grade. Just filling pages and pages and pages is not good discussion. Good discussion is about give and take. It's about selectivity, right? Like a conversation, okay? If you get into a conversation, I mean, you ever been on a date with somebody who starts talking and then they talk for like 45 minutes straight, right? That is not a good discussion, okay? So remember, it's not just about sheer volume, it's about engagement. And that's, you know, like some amount of frequency, but also the depth, how much you are back and forthing, how much discussion there is going on, okay? And I'll be able to gauge that stuff. And since it will all be as a matter of record, then it's fine. Notably, because it is all recorded within Quarkus, I will also be able to tell who at the last second goes in and decides to add a bunch of comments to every thread from the past 24 weeks. And that does not count as discussion if you just add a bunch of posts at the end because you're like, crap, 10% of my grade, right? That isn't gonna fly. You have to be engaged in a somewhat ongoing way. I'll endeavor to make that interesting. I'll try to make it interesting, and you can make it interesting for yourself and your fellow students, okay? So that's 10%, and that's the participation grade will be handled through that online discussion forum inside Quarkus, okay? And then through the year, I have some ideas for optional bonus mark things. I don't want to say too much about that. There are some surprises in there, some things I'm working on, but you know, there will be an opportunity to pick up some bonus marks for people that are interested in doing a little bit more. Okay. So just to flag that in advance, you know, the exact shape of that is not in the syllabus because bonus marks aren't, they don't have to be in there. But I do have the intention to do that. Okay. Next, important notes on policies, deadlines, submissions, etc. Okay. First off, your short essay, your long essay, and your video presentation must all be on different things. Let me repeat. Your short essay, your long essay, your major essay, and your video presentation must all be on different things. They must be on different topics. You cannot have them be on the same topic. So you can ask, people will ask, and the answer will be no, you must do something else, okay? You have to have some breadth. If you just super focus on one thing, you're not gonna get this stuff. So that's fine, there's only a few assignments, but bear in mind, they cannot all, the major 3 assignments cannot all be on the same subject. They may not share at all, not even 2 of them, okay? So thing to remember, they must all be on different material. 2, okay, the obligatory warning. Plagiarism will not be tolerated. Let me be clear about this. And yeah, let's be clear about this. I am a pretty flexible guy, okay? I tend to be, I think, relatively understanding, okay? As we'll discuss, I'm pretty flexible on questions about deadlines and lateness. I'm sensitive to people's personal concerns, right? And like, in addition to being, to teaching, you know, I'm a therapist. Like, I'm concerned with your emotional health and well-being. I am, okay? And I'm aware that being a student is like not easy, and these days, even less easy. But one thing that I am not tolerant of is plagiarism. It's not okay. This is a 3rd-year course, okay? Now, virtually every year, I get some students who think that they can copy past some stuff, the internet, and that it won't get picked up. It will. It's got electronic records, but also I know how to read tonal shifts, okay? So just don't do it, okay? At this point in your university career, you should have a sense of what constitutes plagiarism. But the basics of it is, if you're using somebody else's ideas or words and you're not attributing them, you're plagiarizing, period, full stop. That also includes to like reusing your own papers. If you submit a paper to me, right, that you've submitted to another course, that's also plagiarizing, okay? Now, I allow a certain amount of within the course, by which I mean, like I said, your proposal. I expect that some of you are gonna reuse things from your proposal in your paper. That's half the point. That's not, I'm not talking about that. But like, if I'm reading your paper and I come across a passage that seems like curiously differently written, right? And this happens some frequency, I will definitely flag it. I will certainly run it through analysis. It's dead easy to do, okay? And you don't have to use Turnitin to do it. There's many resources available in order to do an analysis. And if it turns out that there's plagiarism, I will prosecute and take to the administration absolutely every single case without question. I will do this, okay? It's important. Now, it's just simple. Just don't do that. Okay? Simple. Okay, and there are links here. How not to plagiarize. You know how not to plagiarize. Like, it's not rocket science. So just, don't. Okay. On the note of video presentations, just for reference, the date of the video presentation, once you get it, typically cannot be changed. If you can convince somebody to swap dates with you, you are also swapping topics, just for reference. Okay, so if it comes up and then all of a sudden you can't do it, yeah, if you're super sick or something, obviously there's like a little bit of flexibility, but not a lot. You can't just at the end of the day be like, I'm not ready. And it's a video presentation, so it's not like coming into class to do it. Like, you should have a reasonable progression ahead of time. The like click and send everybody the link thing, right? And I'm suggesting we basically put stuff through YouTube on private channel, but we can talk about that. The point is that, like, come presentation day, your video presentation is available, okay? And hence, basically, if there's just no explanation, you can't give your presentation or whatever, you don't leave much option. I basically have to give you a 0. This, I add, carries over generally speaking. If I don't get an assignment from you, period, if I don't get it, it gets a 0. I can't give you a grade for something you haven't given me to grade. However, so you're always better off turning something in, even if it's half-baked, even if it's like, get something down, because something is better than nothing, always, always. The choice is between a 0, get 30% on a paper. If it's, whatever, you still got 30%, okay? And I will look for places where I can give you something, in sort of in keeping with the level of work that you've engaged in. Okay, so always turn something in. Now, late marks. Here's the thing. Technically speaking, late marks are subject on any of your assignments to a 1% a day cumulative penalty, including weekends. However, that means that's only if you don't get an extension. If you want an extension, you have to ask for one, period. If you want an extension, you have to ask for one from me, okay? But I have, I think, a fairly compassionate policy about extensions. So here are some things that I will grant you an extension for, okay? You're sick, have an extension. You, I don't know, had a serious emotional breakdown, have an extension. Your pet died, have an extension. You broke up with somebody, have an extension. You are having like a terrible tear your hair out situation with your, terrible roommates, have an extension. Your family situation at home is really rough, okay? Have an extension. Your workload has just, you're in 6 courses and things are piling up on you. Yeah, you can have an extension, okay? You still have to ask me. I still have to agree, but you can have an extension, okay? Here's one that usually throws people when I say it. You have a terrible problem with plagiarism, and you tried and tried, but you just couldn't quite seem to get the paper to come together in time. I will give you an extension. Basically, if you come to me and you don't bullshit me, if you tell me the real reason, okay, and you honestly ask for an extension, I'm likely to give you one. And you should know that up front. There's like basically no reason not to. I'm very generous with extensions because honestly, I don't really understand why in this context everybody should be like, life is hard already. Let's not be brutal to each other unnecessarily. Now, I'm not gonna like give you unlimited extensions partly because I don't want all the grading to pile up at the end because it makes my life kind of a hassle, but also because I don't want it to pile up for you. If you keep kicking things down the line, then you're gonna end up with a ton of work to do all together, okay? And that's not good for you. It'll be high stress, okay? But the point is, like, you need an extra week, come and ask me. Just come and ask me, okay? Now, I also acknowledge that sometimes things happen where you don't get it done. I mean, okay, so like I have my own history with things like depression personally, okay? And I get it. Sometimes it's like I didn't get it done because I couldn't get out of bed, right? Because I was so miserable and nihilistic. Okay, so sometimes you're not gonna hit it in time, but then come to me. You don't have to spill your life story. You don't have to overshare, but you gotta give me something to work with. You gotta kind of tell me a little bit about what's going on. And I try to give you my best promise that I will be compassionate about that. I mean, I do it for a living. So, you know, I don't think that offering an extension is a big deal personally. Okay. So if you need an extension, ask me for one. Ask me for one. You are almost certainly likely to get one. Even if it's just like, oh my God, I can't get this to come together. You still got to ask. If you don't ask, you're going to get the late marks, unless it's a case where, you know, it's like I was so depressed I couldn't get out of bed. However, I do ask, like with the plagiarism thing, I just ask, don't bullshit me. Please don't bullshit me, okay? I don't like it, and to be honest, it pisses me off. And, you know, given that I have the policy that I have, I think that's a reasonable and compassionate policy. Now, I understand that for lots of students, they have spent much of their, you know, schooling and academic career in an adversarial relationship with their instructors. They feel like they have to, like, you know, whatever. People are terrorized by their previous teaching experiences, and they don't think they can actually ask me. So I'm telling you as clearly as possible, just ask me, or ask fellow students who have taken other courses with me. I tend to be very, very forgiving in this respect, but don't bullshit me. I cut through bullshit for a living. It's what I do professionally. I get paid well to cut through other people's bullshit in various forms. And so don't bullshit me. Okay, because probably I'll know. But, and here's the thing, I probably will know because I got a pretty solid bullshit detector. But if I don't know, and that's possible too, right? Maybe you're an excellent bullshitter. Maybe I was off that day, right? Maybe both. If you get away with it, that's worse for you. It's worse because you're going to get that good getting away with it feeling, right? Of bullshitting. And the thing is, what that will do is it will embolden you to do it again, right? Like anything like that. If you think you've gotten away with it, then what that teaches you is, oh, I can get away with it again. And then you'll do it again, probably. You'll think that it's risk-free, and you will probably expand the habit. And eventually, the likelihood is that will blow up in your face, right? You will try to bullshit the wrong person. They will notice, and they will be considerably less forgiving about the issue that I am. And that's the kind of thing that, like plagiarism, can completely destroy your academic career. So just don't bullshit me. Just don't. Please. Like, just, it's disrespectful. I endeavor not to bullshit you. Please endeavor not to bullshit me. We can all be on a first name basis and be friendly. I'm not out to get you. It's not an adversarial process. I'm not looking for reasons to like take your grades. I don't want that. I want you to have a good experience. But part of that is we have to maintain honesty. So don't bullshit me. If you need an extension, just ask for one. Okay, great. Late papers. Okay, course communication, we already covered. Email, Quercus internal, whatever. You know, but try to keep it brief and expect 48-hour turnaround. Okay, and office hours. Yeah, like I said, if you need to make an appointment, like if you need to talk privately, and people sometimes do, you know, reach out and we'll figure that out, okay? Bear in mind your other students, like your fellow students, right? So there are some time constraints involved, but I also am aware of the stress that people are under. Now, there's something I should say here. One of the things I will shortly be providing everybody is a list of therapeutic resources. Why? Because university's hard, and because the world is these days kind of stressful. You know, it really was before, but you know, this year's really putting the icing on that cake, right? And in addition to that, like, people's circumstances are really weird and disrupted, and I know that. You know, I get that people have had some time to adjust, but in some ways that actually has exacerbated things. So I understand people are under a lot of stress. However, the flip side of this is I am a psychotherapist, okay, and I'm receptive to your problems, but I can't be your therapist. So it's a conflict of interest. I can't have a dual relationship. You can't be my student and a client. And that means that really ultimately I can help you in some ways. If you're in acute distress, I'm not going to say no, right? I'm going to talk to you, okay, within reason. My time is limited and but like I'm not going to turn you away if you need to talk, okay? But I am going to strongly sort of urge you, right, that it's like, okay, but we can't, you got to actually get a therapist. So I'll give you a list of therapists. If you've seen a therapist before, you know the drill. If you haven't, consider it. If you've never done it, our culture has a weird relationship to therapy. We treat it like emergency medicine. People wait until they feel like they're about to explode, then they go see a therapist. If we treated it more like going to the gym or like getting your checkup, your 6-month checkup, at the dentist or the doctor or something, the situation would be very different, okay? And therapy, in my experience, I mean, I do it professionally, so I'm biased, but it can be quite enriching, quite enriching. And useful in terms of managing your feelings and your difficulties, okay? So yeah, so I'll be providing a list of therapeutic resources, and I strongly encourage people to check that out, okay? Right, Quarkus will be used for things, students with disability and accessibility. Yeah, right off the bat, I got no problem with that. If you have accessibility accommodations, just let me know. That's it. I'm not gonna, you don't have to beg or scrape, and it's not weird, and yeah. Accessibility is there for a reason. I think it's extremely important, actually, for sort of rendering things fair and equitable and creating the appropriate environment in the classroom. So yeah, just if you have an accessibility accommodations, please just let me know and I'll take that into consideration. No problem at all. Okay, and last thing on that note on inclusive, fair, equitable, etc. I expect people to maintain a certain kind of attitude in this course with respect to each other. Here's how it is, okay? I expect people to be open-minded. It's non-negotiable. You don't have to agree with everything. You're going to encounter, I don't agree with everything. You're going to encounter theories and ideas and interpretations in the material from me and from your fellow students that you don't agree with. Fine, that's okay. Be respectful, you're right. If you start insulting people, I will crush your contribution very quickly. That's not okay. You have to be respectful. The idea is to have open dialogue here, okay, when we're discussing. These are complex ideas. Nobody fully understands this. Nobody, not me, not Jung, nobody, okay? A lot of this stuff is a deeply mysterious aspect of human experience. It's not easy to put into a bottle, okay? So people's perspectives, yeah, there are things to debate and things to discuss, but be respectful, okay? That also goes, I expect that people are going to be sort of respectful in their politics, okay? It's if you ask me, politics are symptomatic, okay, not the root thing, and that's something I'll talk about later a bit. But the point is this, it's like, don't go after people on the basis of politics, and don't go on political screeds. It's not a poli-sci course, okay? Some of the material is stuff where there is going to be some charge to it, right? It's going to be charged. It's going to be activated for people. I understand that, okay? And I expect that people will, do their level best, right? Stuff is always open for discussion. If you're feeling really activated, okay. And usually if there's subject matter that I think is likely to be quite triggering for certain people, I'm going to bring that up in advance, okay, so that you have adequate warning. But in the main, the idea is I want you to be open-minded, okay? I want you to try to open up the possibility that different perspectives really can contribute to things, and I expect people to be respectful. And that is non-negotiable. If people are not respectful in some way, shape, or form, I will warn you, obviously, gently, and then sternly, and then ultimately I will exclude you if I feel that you are being belligerent. I've never had anybody do that. I've had some people come across pretty strident now and again because people get, excited about this stuff. I get excited about this stuff. But my expectation is that you're going to treat your peers respectfully as peers, right? Debates. If we get into something of a debate, there are rules. You may certainly debate or challenge or question things that I'm saying. I would encourage you to do so. I did as a student all the time. I continue to. You know, my mentor and colleague, John Vervaeke, and I work together on a lot of projects, okay? And John and I don't agree on everything. I most recently contributed to an anthology of his, and I wrote a chapter that, you know, made a lot of critiques of some of the theory that he was talking about. This is something we'll be taking up in a video on air. So criticism is okay, provided that it's rationally motivated. But it also can't run away with the class. Now, that's partly going to come up in online discussion group and partly going to come up in sort of Zoom discussions, right? But the point is, it's like if we start getting into a back and forth that's hijacking the whole class, I'm probably going to shut that down just because it sort of includes, or it doesn't include people. It's quite exclusive, right? So yeah, so you should just bear that in mind. Also, I will shut things down if it looks like I'm going to disastrously lose. No, I'm just kidding. But the point is, I reserve the right to decide when the conversation is sort of over. That doesn't mean I'm not open to talk about it. I'll talk about it in office hours. I'll talk about it. But it does mean that within the given discussion forum or within that sort of classroom Zoom setting, that, you know, like sometimes I need to sort of put a pause on things so that we can keep moving on the material. Okay. And that, folks, is the syllabus. I'm going to end that where I started. Read the syllabus. Just read it. Read it. Read the syllabus, okay? Read the syllabus. Check this video. I will answer questions in person. Like I said, I've got office hours tomorrow, but I can answer questions in discussion, right, and stuff next group. You may have questions. Lots of this stuff will be expanded as we go, but do read the syllabus. Like I said, every year people ask me questions and they do things, and it's like, I sort of think maybe you didn't read the syllabus and you didn't read the announcements either. So you got to read stuff. That's your end of the bargain. It's a third-year course. I can't do too much hand-holding. I can do some guidance, and I will, okay? But I can't do hand-holding. Okay, so that is the structure of the course. So the next bit, provided that my voice doesn't give out, the next bit that I'll record is I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to Jung. And once that is posted up, that will be sort of the lectures for this week. We'll jump in for next week. So I can't see any of you, but I'm glad you're here, individually, distributed through time. What a strange experience this is. Anyway, I really am glad. I love this course. It really does matter to me. I like the material. I enjoy teaching it. And every year, it's a real treat. Every class has its own flavor. This year is unusual. Right? It's different, and there are going to be some challenges associated with that, but I really earnestly hope that you guys will have a meaningful and enriching experience, intellectually and personally. And I really hope that that's that for you. It certainly was for me. So I hope that I can pass that or recreate it or recreate the conditions. Anyway, okay, so good. I hope you found this useful. The next lecture bit that we'll post up is going to be specifically sort of an intro to lecture, nothing too strenuous. We get into it more next week, okay? So I'll talk to you soon in a minute, whenever you click on the next link. The time language around this is really tricky. Okay, I'm gonna stop.